Brilliant. So, Pnawn da, croeso, and welcome to our monthly community-led housing networks, which is part of the Communities Creating Homes programme, supported by Welsh Government and the Nationwide Foundation. I'm very pleased to be able to welcome you to this special climate edition of the network. Particularly as myself, I've been working for environmental and housing sector for about 30 years now, so I'm absolutely delighted and thrilled that the Welsh Government has decided to bring those two areas together into an overarching climate ministry. And I'm very, very excited to have the new Minister for Climate Change, who is formerly the Housing Minister, Senedd member Julie James, with us today. And Julie, I'll let Joe do the kind of formal introduction of yourself and the relationship between us and the department in a moment, but just a personal thank you for coming along today so early in your ministry. I'm sure you've got so much to do at the moment, so thank you for coming. And I'm also thrilled to be so early in this ministry to be able to host three speakers from two different projects that are working across Wales to increase well-being, energy efficiency, and tackle climate change. We've got dilyn, Mclellan and Peter Hughes from the Nyth project, and Alun Watkins from Optimised Retrofit, and we'll be really excited to hear what they've got. So we've been working with those projects to see what can be extended to the community-led housing network from what they're doing, the work they're doing, and seeing how we can benefit housing co-ops and other forms of community-led housing projects through that work. Also really excited today to be able to welcome Badger and other members of Tir Cyffredin, which is the newest housing co-op in Wales, and they will be very shortly launching their loan stock issue. I'll talk a little bit more about what loan stock is when I introduce them later on. Without further ado, because we've got such a jam-packed session, I'm going to hand over to my Director of Inclusive Communities, Giselle Lavelle, to introduce Julie, and we'll go from there. Diolch yn fawr.
Great, thank you, Alan. So yeah, just to reiterate, the Communities Creating Homes and the Wales Cooperative Centre have been working to develop the community-led housing sector across Wales for in excess of 8 years now, and very kindly funded through Welsh Government and the Nationwide Foundation. And these networks, as we can see, are getting bigger and bigger each time we run them, which shows how much the sector and the movement is starting to grow. You know, we know climate change is a real issue, and it was great that you know, that's been recognised within terms of Welsh Government, but we also know the need for creating more affordable and more social rent homes is a huge issue across Wales. So working together as a sector, we've got a key role in helping to support Welsh Government in terms of delivering its aims in the programme of government to develop some of those houses, whether they be the social rent or looking at affordable housing, but most importantly using sustainable materials and methods of construction that can develop homes that last not just now, but for our future generations as well. I'd just like to say how pleased we are, and I think I can speak on behalf of the community-led housing sector, to see what's been put together in your new portfolio, Minister. It's admittedly a very large portfolio, but it's very much around placemaking. It's got all of those key elements in it, so you're able to influence the develop of really strong communities and homes for the future. So we're really pleased to see all the elements that have been drawn together over it. So with further ado, I will hand over to Julie James, the Minister for Climate Change at Welsh Government. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. You know, I'm really very pleased to be able to come and speak to you. I'm really sorry I can't stay for the whole thing, but I hope I'll have time for a little bit of a Q&A before I've got to go. I think I last spoke about my support for community-led housing back in September, which was the very first community-led housing festival that we had. A lot has changed since then, even though we're still in, unfortunately, very uncertain times. I don't have to tell any of you that the last 18 months have presented some of the most challenging times we as a nation have ever faced. And the pandemic has brought into sharp focus, hasn't it, the fundamental importance of having a home, the need for quality housing, and the positive impact it has. And they've never been felt more across our societies. Many of you will have heard me talk about how important social housing is before. It's one of the top priorities and a key priority for the government. And I reiterated it when I spoke at the Type Out conference yesterday. Some of you may have been at that. It's absolutely crucial that our focus on that social housing remains. And we've set a very challenging commitment to deliver 20,000 new low carbon homes for rent within the social sector during this government term. I also put out a written statement published earlier this week, which sets out the detail behind the 20,000 target, focusing on increasing homes in the social sector. And I just want to be really clear, because I keep being asked this target is not about market housing. This is a target for social housing. But nevertheless, we believe in truly sustainable communities, and to achieve this, we have to have communities that are mixed tenure. We don't want to repeat the difficulties of the past, where we've made large estates of single tenures. And can I just say, I'm not just talking about social tenure there. That's a problem. Single tenure estates are a problem if they're all owner occupied as well. What we want is mixed communities with good social cohesion in them, with a variety of all the people who share our community with us, living together in a good space which satisfies people's needs. I think it's really important to say that. We have to have those truly sustainable communities, and we have to have mixed tenure in order to be able to ensure that. So there's a continued need in Wales for market housing, but our target as a government will focus on social and intermediate homes. We will define the target using the recognised TAN 2 affordable housing definition. So we will include homes rented out by social landlords, homes for social rent, intermediate homes for rent, and shared ownership schemes.
Julie,
Yeah.
Julie, sorry to interrupt, but people are struggling to hear you. Is it possible for you to? Thank you very much. Thank you. I know you're having problems with your mic today, but that would be great.
I'm having problems with the technology generally, actually. So I'll try and project as if I'm talking to you in a live conference. The other problem I've got is my notes and my speech keep disappearing off the screen. So I'm having two problems. So I'll shout a bit. Yeah, I've had to abandon my headphones for those of you who didn't hear the conversation earlier, because they kept telling me loudly that their battery is about to run out, and I couldn't hear anything else. So isn't technology wonderful? Yes. So basically, just to reiterate then, what I've been saying is that we're really, really keen on building the social housing with government money, but that we really want to include homes rented out by social landlords, homes for social rent, intermediate homes for rent, and shared ownership schemes. We know that building the houses takes time, and there's a need for new housing right across Wales. So it's vital for social landlords to be able to meet immediate housing needs, and one tool in achieving this is through acquisitions. So while the vast majority of our commitment will be building new homes, a small proportion of acquisitions will be included within the housing target, provided they are long-term permanent homes for social rent. We're also committing to a focus on low carbon homes through our target. We're in the process of setting energy and decarbonisation standards for new housing projects and housing sites that the Welsh Government financially supports. And that's in line with all the policies that are driving Wales to net zero carbon for our future. The target is an absolutely challenging one. Housing needs estimates show that under the central estimates for Wales, 7,400 additional homes are needed over the next 5 years. And that includes 3,500 additional affordable homes each year. So the target is challenging and deliberately goes beyond that. I think that's the right thing to do, but we do not underestimate the enormity of the task in front of us to do this. In order to do it, we absolutely have to have community-led housing as part of the mix. It's got to be a principal part of the housing solution. The whole point of cooperative housing is to enable people to take more control of how their housing is delivered and managed. And I remain absolutely committed to supporting those projects across Wales. It hasn't really grown across Wales the way we'd have liked. We've got about 50 community groups engaged with communities creating homes, and we've continued our support over 2021-22 alongside the Nationwide Foundation, as Giselle just said. The cooperative principles are a priority, and we want to remain focused on embedding those core principles. I'm really happy to support the further development of community-led housing, where there's a registered social landlord partner through our housing social grant as well. So just so we have other routes to it. There are a number of potential opportunities for community-led housing, particularly in rural communities, through the South Build Wales scheme and the Rural Housing Enablement Programme. Both programmes also provide real opportunities to overcome some of the barriers facing community-led housing groups. And again, I really welcome your thoughts and feedback on how community-led housing can rise to the challenge of being a big part of the housing solution here in Wales, and how this community of people can help us deliver against our challenging housing targets. So I want to just close by welcoming the focus of the network today on climate change and well-being. I know that you share our goals of the positive impacts of community-led housing on the people who live there. The research recently published by the Welsh Cooperative Centre showed that there were many more advantages of living in community-led housing during the pandemic, for example, including much greater practical support for people and reduced isolation and loneliness, just as small examples. As Giselle said, and I was sort of smiling nervously, we've brought together environment, energy, housing, regeneration, planning and transport across the government. I mean, you know, it's an enormous opportunity to pull the levers together to develop the sustainable communities the people of Wales want and need. And I know you recognise that, but I can't pretend it's not an enormous challenge to pull them all together as well, and to make sure that we don't have traditional silo thinking. The whole point of bringing them together is to make sure that they interact properly and we understand the impact, for example, of transport on housing, housing on transport, and the infrastructure that goes with it, and their effect overall on our ability to achieve carbon zero inside the challenging timescales that we have. So, you know, the Warm Homes programme is a fundamental part of what we'll need to do to decarbonise our housing stock, but we've got some real challenges ahead of us as well. You know, the main energy network in Wales is gas-fired, and you know, large numbers of people rely on the energy network, not just for the gas-fired power stations, but also just the direct heat in their homes. So we've got a big piece to go to move people away into you know, carbon zero heating without creating a social injustice across Wales and driving more people into fuel poverty. I do not have all the answers to this, so I'm really relying on you and your networks to help feed in the really good ideas I know that you will have to help us respond to that. I know your breakout session next is exactly on that. How do you respond to the climate change challenge? And I really welcome your feedback on that. And I'm looking forward to getting the suggestions that come out of that breakout session after the event. You know, we've been really clear that the government takes the climate change emergency really seriously. It will be an absolute fundamental part of every single decision we make going forward. So we have a housing crisis in Wales and we have a climate emergency crisis in Wales. But I think that solving one of those crises, the housing crisis, helps solve the other crisis. And this network of people are definitely the people who will help us to be able to do that. So I'm really happy to take questions, suggestions, contributions for as long as I've got. I've got 5 more minutes, but I'm really happy to do that in the period we've got left. And then if you want to submit anything else that we don't get to afterwards, and you know, every suggestion, comment, question, gratefully received.
Diolch yn fawr, Julie. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us, introducing your priorities for the new ministry, and for giving us the opportunity now to ask you questions, which is fantastic. And I will do my best to identify from the room who would like to ask a question. So I can see one hand up at the moment, which is Tracy Alexander. If you'd like to turn your microphone on, please. Thank you. And Cara after that.
Just say we've been talking for many years, and there's from the future generation.
Sorry, there's somebody's mic on. Thank you, Cara. Cheers. Tracy, thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, can I congratulate Welsh Government for bringing together in and holistic manner all the various statutory areas such as transport, and it will be, might I suggest, and I think I already have, that we bring together all these areas around our housing, our future housing areas, and that we do that through policy as well at Welsh Government, so that we don't have isolated projects going in different directions. So in effect, I see community-led housing being so important in this mix, because it demonstrates every area that holistic climate change areas that we have brought, that Julie has brought together under one ministry, such as transport, leading off housing estates, having a national transportation so we can get from one area to another, having our energy concentrated around community-led housing. So what do you think of that, Julie?
Tracy.
So Tracy, I think that's absolutely what we're trying to do in bringing the areas together. We are absolutely aware that in the, we've got, the government's like an enormous tanker. I'm sure you've heard that analogy before, and trying to sort of move it around is not a quick process. You can't just stop and reverse. But we've been slowly shifting the tanker, so we don't have so many schemes that cut across the core principles of the government. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't any still out there, but we're in the process of trying to pull them all back together. But some of it's not easy to do at all. So the one I gave the example of, we have a scheme that assists people in fuel poverty to swap really inefficient gas boilers for efficient gas boilers. That really helps them with their bills, but it does not help us get to carbon zero for obvious reasons. If we swap them to air source heat pumps, their housing isn't insulated enough to be able to manage that and so on. So we've got to put things in the right sequence to help make sure we get a social justice message across as well. The great thing about community-led housing, especially building new housing, is that you can build it to the right standards that don't have those terrible retrofit problems, and you can build the community around them. We've changed a lot of the rules in Wales. Planning Policy Wales now absolutely emphasises the importance of place and placemaking, active communities that have, their work, health requirements, education requirements, housing requirements, community requirements within a reasonable distance, with active travel and public transport associated with that. But we've got a lot of old communities that don't have that we've got to be able to retrofit, not just the housing, but all the other bits fit as well. So it's a big ask. And during the COVID pandemic, our public transport systems have more or less collapsed because of the lack of passengers, the loss of fee income, and all the rest of it. So we've got a big piece of work to put those back. And I really hope you'll see that we nationalise the train system, because it was just collapsing. We're in the process of working on the buses, so that we can start the process of getting properly integrated public transport in place and getting modal shifts, so getting people out of their cars into decent public transport that works for them, not terrible public transport that you are basically socially deprived if you have to use. But that's easy for me to say and very much more difficult to achieve. And we will need the help of all of these communities on this call today and across Wales to help us do that. So any ideas you've got for what would be necessary where you are in Wales for us to put in place, I'm really grateful. I don't have all the ideas, and neither do the civil servants. So I'm really happy to get those ideas and practical suggestions so that we can work together to do it.
Thank you very much. Could I ask, so we haven't got much time with the Minister, so if you keep your questions quick and to the point, that would be very much appreciated. And Cara, can I come to you next? Thank you.
Actually, it's Steve. Steve and Cara.
Okay, so can I ask a question? Right, so can I fire away? Can I just ask the Minister, I mean, we've been campaigning on housing from a community years. We were working with the Assembly, well, going back 20 years, about the idea of low carbon housing, community-led housing and so on. There's been a lot of legislation since then, but there just seems to be a total disparity between what the government is releasing in terms of reports and aspiration and actually what they're doing, because I can't see how anything has changed in that time, over 20 years. Can I just quote from the Wellbeing and Future Generations 2020 housing report? It says,
can I interrupt and ask you to make a question directly, because we haven't got much time.
The question is via this quote from the Future Generations of Wellbeing Commission. It says, we also need to see a greater focus on effective implementation of policies and legislation. In Wales, we can sometimes see a gap between the aspirations of legislation and the reality of the implementation. How are you going to bridge that gap, and how much longer is it going to take?
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. So I'm gonna run out of time now. But I appreciate the frustration of the slowness of some of it. As I said, it's difficult to change government policy quickly. We have done some things on the ground. I'm sorry that you feel we haven't been able to do anything in 20 years, but that's definitely not so. Apart from anything else, we've managed to implement the Welsh Housing Quality Standard across all social housing. So we had the worst housing stock in Europe before we started that programme, and now most of it is at APCC. So it's not true that we haven't done stuff. I appreciate, though, the frustration of not being able to change it faster. One of the big problems we have is the lag in the planning system. So if you have an extant planning consent, you have 5 years to build it out. And it doesn't matter how much you change the regulations in between. Once you have it, you can build it at that standard. So we're looking to see whether we can change the primary legislation to prevent some of that. And I've also had a lot of conversations with some of the big house builders, which is now bearing fruit slowly, to stop them building some of the worst housing. But a lot of this is market forces, and I don't control all the levers for that. So I do appreciate your frustration, but if you've got practical suggestions for what you think we should be able to do to change that, I'd be really grateful to have them. I've seen the Future Generations report. It tells me what the problem is. It doesn't tell me the solution. So I'd be really happy to talk to you about what the solutions on the ground look like and what we think we could practically do. Now, I'm really sorry, I'm going to run out of time now.
Yes.
To people who want to ask things. So if you want to feed them through to us, I'd be very happy to come back again, and I'd be very happy to try and do some of it in an interactive way, over email and so on as well. So I'm really happy to do that. I genuinely do want to understand where people are coming from and what their practical solutions are. So apologies, I shall have to run. I'm getting shouted at by my office virtually for not being in my next meeting. So apologies for running. Thank you for the interest, and I'd be really happy to work with you going forward as well.
Thank you for joining us, Julie, and we'll collate all the questions and send them across to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Giselle. Thanks now.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Brilliant. Yes, as Joe said, obviously the Minister there is really interested in what you have to say, and we will collate anything you want to send to us and send that on. And as she's kindly offered to come back to a session, maybe we will try and arrange that at some point. So there is more time for more direct conversation around some of these issues. And thank you. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to I know there's a number of hands raised by the end of that, but yeah, please do either put it in the chat now or send it to us directly. Maybe Casey, my colleague, could put our emails in, and we're happy to respond. And you've certainly got my email because I've been sending you links and stuff. So and yeah, so we'll go on to the next part of the session in a moment. And I have to set this up. We're going to go into breakout rooms. Well, we will be hoping to answer some of those questions around what can community-led housing bring to tackling the climate change issues that we have in Wales. But before I do that, and while I'm setting up the breakout rooms, I thought this would be a great opportunity to welcome our newest housing co-op in Wales, which I mentioned at the beginning, and they're about to launch their loan stock issue. Some of you will already know that housing co-ops are completely self-financing, or more or less, and they have to go about working out how to raise the money to create their homes. And most housing co-ops across the UK do so to meet an affordable rent, and many do to actually meet the kind of local housing allowance rent, so a social rent. And one of the ways they do that, and most housing co-ops have a mortgage, but they also seek investment and investors through loan stock issue. And this is an investment, it's not a donation. It's a way that people who care about affordable housing and want to support housing co-ops can get involved and invest some of their spare capital, if they have some, to make it happen. So we're really pleased on this network to be able to support housing groups. And one way we can do that is bring attention to you all of projects that are existing, going on, and what they need. So without further ado, I'll welcome Badger to the platform, and he can tell you a bit more about Tir Cyffredin and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to raise. Diolch.
Thanks very much, Alan. Pnawn da, everyone. Can you hear me? Am I on mute?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me on to talk about our project. And yeah, it was really interesting hearing Julie speak, and heartening to hear her talk about a lot of the topics that we discuss over the dinner table quite often. So let me introduce the project that we're doing, that we are setting up a cooperative to do. We're hoping to raise the finances to buy this property, Bryn Ternol, on the outskirts of Mehefin. The property is, and I'll do a little talk, and then I think there'll be a picture or two to show you what it looks like. It's a wonderful place, a beautiful place on the outskirts of Mehefin. It's a short walking distance from town. It sits in about an acre of land, and the house has been in the ownership of a landlord for the last 20-ish years, and in this time he's looked after it very well with a lot of care, and many people have passed through, calling this place as a home. It's been centre for many cultural events, notably a festival, the Elswenio Festival, which happens every 2 years. And this is a really big event, involves many people in the community, and it's a sort of one of the central events of the Mehefin yearly calendar. So currently there's 5 residents in this house. I'll just quickly introduce us. It's Elsa, Sadie, Gareth, Joanna, and myself, some of whom might be on this call right now. And we absolutely love living here. We love living in this house, and we love being a part of this community and living near this town. And we're strongly involved in the community. We work providing and coordinating healthcare. We work land work, music sessions, gigs, and we're all involved in working towards positive change in terms of sustainability, and a range of other things: inclusion, rights of minorities, health and well-being. These are all things passionate, like close to our hearts, and we're actively involved in working on these things. We're really passionate about integrating with the local community as well. Many of us speak Welsh, and others are learning. So the situation we're in is that Tony, the landlord, is moving away, and both he and the current 5 residents are really keen for this property to move into a cooperatively owned situation. And we all think this is the best way that it can continue to function as a sort of as in a beneficial way for the community, as it has in past years. Yeah, we're really keen to keep this as a sort of secure, affordable home option for people in the future. We think it's a really important cultural good for the town to do that. And we want to offer an opportunity for people with diverse backgrounds, stories and skills to to be able to enrich the local area. So we've been working on this over the last several months. We have developed a financial plan. There's a lot to do in that regard. We had an excellent support network, particularly Alun and the Wales Cooperative Centre, and also Radical Roots, who are an organisation that help and support co-ops to set up. Our landlord Tony has really kindly modified the asking price to fit our requirements. And what we need to do is, in order for this to work, to be able to bring this into a cooperative, we need to have 7 residents, and at the moment we've got room for 5. So what we need to do is we need to fit out 2 of the outbuildings with insulation and turn them into dwelling spaces. This house is really in need of attention in terms of its energy efficiency. We're really keen to figure out how to do that. To any advice and things that are available to us, we're really keen to hear about. I'm really looking forward to hearing about the retrofit presentation that's coming up. And yes, so in order to do all this, we need to raise, well, what we're hoping to do is to raise £140,000 in loan stock, and then we would take out a mortgage of £142,000, and we're going to start the campaign to raise the loan stock next week. And we're really looking forward to going out and talking to people about what we're doing and trying to raise interest and get people excited about getting involved. We're really hoping to and excited, well, we're really excited about the fact that we're going to set up a co-op, and we really intend to look after this place with care, keep it in good condition, improve on its shortcomings, and keep this space beneficial to the community and those passing through in need of a space to live. We want to build this culture that will go indefinitely into the future on this property. That's what we're hoping for. So yeah, that's us, and I'd love to chat with anyone who's interested or answer any questions if I can. I haven't been looking at the chat while I've been doing this, so if any questions have come up, I can look. Yeah, so thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Badger, for coming. I'm really excited that your project is gaining ground, and hopefully you'll be fully be able to move in soon as a housing co-op and own the property and keep it, as you say, in the way you would like to over many decades to come. There'll be time for Q&A at the end. And if you have thoughts, please do put them in the chat now, and we can come back to them, or just note down your questions and come back when we do the Q&A with all the speakers. The breakout rooms I've got ready now, so I will send you all the way into them, and then there's 10 minutes to talk about whatever you've heard just now, to meet each other, introduce yourselves to one another, and talk, if you like, about the wider question of what can community-led housing bring to climate change solutions. And then we'll be back after 10 to hear from our other key speakers today, from Nyth and from Optimised Retrofit. Okay, great. Thank you all very much, and I'll see you very shortly.
Hello.
Hi, Lydia.
Hi.
Would you like to be assigned to a group?
Yes, please.
I am not sure why you haven't been, but let me do that now.
Great.
Ah.
Maybe I've been banned.
Have you had an invitation to join?
Oh, hang on. Yes, I have. Hang on.
Oh, there we go.
I've just.
Carenza, are you interested in joining a group, or are you having problems joining?
I think she's got something in the chat. She's just going to hang on here for now.
Okay.
And is Katie Fowler? Does it look like Katie's not gone to breakout room?
Yeah, please do. Thank you, Casey, for starting the recording again. That would have been a tragedy, but yeah, great. So I think Dylan is going to speak on behalf of Nest next. So if I could welcome you to the platform, Dylan, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having myself and my colleague Peter, who's somewhere in this room. There's a wave from him. And greetings from a lovely sunny day in North Wales for a change, although I believe harsher weather is on its way. I'm just going to get my slides up and running. And I'll turn my camera off just so we've got some more bandwidth. So hopefully you're all seeing the Nest logo at the top there, Welsh Government, and what is Nest? It's PowerPoint.
We are.
Great, Alan. So what is Nest? So Nest is part of the Welsh Government Warm Homes programme to reduce fuel poverty in Wales. So one of the things Nest does is we offer free advice and support across Wales in regards to energy. So we can look at people to save money on their energy bills. We can look at people to access grants such as warm home discount, or to access services for vulnerable people like the priority service registers. We can signpost for benefit checks to help people maximise their income. We work with a huge network of partners that we signpost to, like fire services, like to Welsh Water for their social tariffs and reduced rates, care and repairs, Warm Wales, the list goes on and on. We have a huge network of partners that we can signpost people for support. So anyone in Wales can access that support and advice via our free phone number. But what we offer is where a customer is eligible, Nest will offer a package of free home energy efficiency improvements, such as a new boiler, central heating system, or insulation to a property. And obviously the main thing we're looking at with that is to reduce fuel poverty in Wales, help people lower energy bills and increase their income. And of course, all this will lead to an increase in benefit in health and well-being, which is I think very pertinent in this current climate, especially as people are confined to their homes more. And I think it's been a very harsh winter for a lot of people. People may be afraid to put their heating on because it's too expensive, even though they're confined to homes for long times. Excuse me. I know towards the end of February as well, we had a very cold spell up in North Wales. So, you know, people are concerned about the costs of it. So since Nest's inception in 2011, Nest has provided free home efficiency improvements to over 46,800 households in Wales. It's a huge amount of households that we've improved the efficiency of. And since July 2019, over 1,000 households became eligible via a new health condition eligibility that we extended. So they would have received the measures where they wouldn't have before under the previous means tested routes. So I know, Peter, you worked on the health pilot back in 2019, yeah? I don't know if you want to just expand on that for me, please.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. It was a really interesting pilot we did with the health boards in Wales. So back in 2017, following a very sort of hard winter, there were a high level of excess winter deaths in Wales. and Welsh Government wanted to sort of extend the support through Nest to people with vulnerable sort of chronic conditions rather than just fuel poverty per se. So extending that eligibility to people with those conditions. So we worked with teams around Wales to test this for actually 2 years. And it's involved bringing in teams of respiratory nurses and cardio teams, mental health, community mental health teams. We're on this pilot. In fact, we engaged with about 600 health professionals, and they were feeding referrals through to this scheme. But they did need to sign them off that they had an eligible health condition. But it was a success, and we brought that in 2019 to the scheme so that people can access the scheme without a means tested benefit in place. But if they've got one of these eligible health conditions, obviously the reasoning behind that is having a cold home or a damp home can be detrimental to your health. And yeah, this has been a success. So as Dylan mentioned, in the first year of bringing this scheme in, over 1,000 customers came through with an eligible health condition that wouldn't have actually qualified under the previous Nest scheme rules, the means tested rules. So a very positive change in the scheme. Yeah, so thanks, Dylan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Peter, for explaining that. So just to put that in a nutshell again, Nest, the Welsh Government Warm Homes Programme to reduce fuel poverty. So the advice side we offer and the package of free home energy efficiency improvements we offer to those who are eligible. So I'll just, sorry. Bear with me 1 second, my slides aren't moving forward. Ah, there we go, it's worked. So to be eligible for the home efficiency improvements, it has to be in the private sector. So it has to be owned outright or privately rented or mortgaged. We don't extend to housing associations, and we don't extend to local authorities, as they are responsible for their own housing stock. The property has to be inefficient, and that can be determined by a Nest Home Energy Check. So you can phone our advisors and they'll run through a series of questions to determine. I mean, we might identify that your boiler is 30 years old, so it's you know, that would be it, or there's 40-year-old storage heaters in the property. So they can help to identify that. And then there has to be a means tested benefit in the household, or one of the health conditions as listed there, chronic respiratory, circulatory or mental health condition. Alongside that, there are income thresholds, but they're on our website, which we will signpost to you at the end. So once again, the three things: private sector, inefficient property, and then the means tested benefit or the health conditions. So Pete, I believe it comes under the umbrella of those health conditions, yeah? Yeah, that's right. There are really sort of broad areas of health conditions, and our advice team would be able to discuss with any customer a health condition that they have and be able to confirm if that health condition is an eligible one. We're talking about broad areas of health. Respiratory conditions could be, for example, something like COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or chronic asthma, for example. And then with the circulatory conditions, we are talking to stroke survivors. There's people that have got heart conditions that can qualify. And on the mental health side, that could be anxiety, depression, something like that, or something like dementia and Alzheimer's as well, or Parkinson's. But this isn't a completely exhaustive list. It's down to having that conversation with our advice team to confirm if you've got a qualifying condition. Thanks, Peter. So in regard to the 10-year eligibility, Alan now has been in contact with Nest, and Nest are extending the eligibility to cooperatives, and that will be based on a case-by-case So it will be took on an individual basis. So you'd have to contact the centre and explain your situation to them, and they will look at it at an individual basis. And so that's in regards to the housing cooperatives. So there's a list of our means tested benefits the household must have. So obviously universal credit, there's been huge claims in universal credit during COVID-19 as people have lost their jobs or been furloughed or on lower incomes. Things like pension credit and council tax reduction go massively underclaimed. So if you're on low income or you know of anyone who are on a low income, it's always worth getting a benefit check just to see if you've got any entitlement to that. Say a small amount, even 50 pence of pension credit would entitle you to the Nest home efficiency improvements. Once again, the health scheme, so we're looking at the respiratory, circulatory and mental, as Peter spoke about. There is income thresholds that they're quite generous, and they're on our website, which we'll drop in the chat room shortly. And then, of course, proof of eligibility, we would need to see proof of tenure. So a tenancy agreement, deeds to the property, insurance documents to the property. And with regards to the means to benefits, a benefit award letter or access to your online universal credit account. Regarding the health, which is your prescription, medication package, treatment plan. You know, we don't necessarily have to see a doctor's note that you may have paid for. Pete, do you want to expand on anything there?
Yeah, just to say, yes, absolutely. We didn't want to make it inaccessible to customers on low incomes that might need to have proof of their health condition. So we weren't going to ask them to pay £10 or whatever a GP surgery would charge somebody for a doctor's letter. So by leaving it open like this, at the first point of contact, firstly with the Nest team, when you have a conversation with us, we'll take that customer on trust about their health condition. It would be down the line when we do the survey of the property that we'd require some proof of the health condition. And as Dylan said, it would be something that you'd already got, like a prescription medication package or a letter for example, an X-ray or an outpatient's appointment for a treatment for your condition. Absolutely.
Thanks, Pete. So just have a look at the type of efficiency improvements that Nest currently offers there. So after the whole house assessment, we're looking at new central heating systems, loft insulation, cavity wall insulation, and draft proofing. It wouldn't necessarily be all of that, Pete. No, it might be a combination or just one only.
Yeah, it's down to the surveyors then to, based on their assessment of each individual property, to offer that package, and it could be one or more of these items. So it may be that you get a different type of system offered. You may get the same type of system offered. It all depends upon each individual survey of every property.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Just to explain how that survey sits in the customer journey, there's a quick chart there that explains it. So the customer calls and it's confirmed they're eligible. So that at that point, we'd like to get the Nest whole house survey booked. So that means that an assessor will come out to the property, and it's at that point they'll determine what they think is the best route or the most, the thing that will improve the efficiency of the property the most. So be it just replace the boiler, be it put in new electric heating, it's the surveyor who'll decide that. So we look to get that in within 3 weeks. And then once that's done, we look to get the work done. Pete, remind me, is it in 9 weeks?
Yeah, so the Welsh Government have set some quite challenging targets for the scheme, and the scheme is working within those targets in general. There's been a bit of a sort of a longer delay now since we've had a pandemic in the UK, but certainly before March 2020, we were perhaps hitting those targets much quicker. So the 3-week target for the survey, we were almost completing surveys within a week. I think we're working up to 3 weeks now for your survey. And for the 9 weeks target for your installation to be finished, we're probably working up to that target now, I think, aren't we, Dylan?
Yeah, so it's quite a quick turnover, and that's quite pertinent that maybe people check their seat systems now, you know, so they're not putting the heating on in first cold snap in October, and then they have to wait for this journey, and it could be like December and into the new year before we get it. So I always advise people maybe to have what I would say is like a heating MOT, just have a good check everything's working properly, and then, you know, you can get beat everyone else to it, is what I would suggest. So once the measures are done, there'll be an inspection and a service after 12 months. So that quickly explains the customer journey. And of course, there's the free phone telephone number to our advice line, and the information, further information is on our website. There's loads of further FAQs and terms and conditions in regards to the scheme. I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to stop sharing and ask if there's any questions. Pete, have you picked any up in the chat?
Thanks, Dylan and Peter. We'll go on to questions at the end if we can. After,
of course, yeah. Sorry.
After we've heard from Alan, that would be fantastic. Thank you. And yes, thanks so much for coming to speak. As Dylan said, this support is now available for eligible members of housing cooperatives on a case-by-case basis, and there are some criteria around that which we can send to people. So do get in touch with us, and we'll send out the detail of what that would be. It's around being registered with the FCA and kind of detail like that. So yeah, if there are housing co-ops on the call who would like to know more, then please do. And thanks so much for extending the scheme to housing co-ops. It's a great step forward for us. Thank you. And I'll go on now to introduce Alun Watkins of Optimised Retrofit. This is another organisation and project that we're hoping to develop a kind of deeper association with as a movement, and make available to housing co-ops if it is a possibility. So Alan, please do come to the platform. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. Yeah, I'm actually the innovation manager for Cero. We are running the Optimised Retrofit, or a part of the Optimised Retrofit programme for Welsh Government. So I'll just share my screen, and hopefully that will all work well. If someone could shout and let me know that that's all working.
That's all good, yeah.
Great, okay. So yeah, as I say, I work for Cero. We're running the Optimised Retrofit programme, which is part of the Innovative Housing Programme of Welsh Government. So between, you may have heard of the Innovative Housing Programme, from 2017 to 2020, over £90 million was invested, focused on low energy new build schemes. So work is ongoing with those. Some of those that were funded in the first year are now completed and occupied, but obviously there's the kind of the lag, that the planning, etc., that was referred to earlier. So yeah, some of the IHP2 and IHP3 schemes are still under construction. Then after the completion of that 3-year programme, attention shifted towards the existing homes. It's sometimes a quoted fact that 80% of the buildings that we will be occupying in 2050 have already been built. So new builds are, it's important that we don't add to the retrofit burden, the refurbishment need, by building new homes which aren't net zero, but they're easier to fix. It's an easier problem, and it's a smaller problem. So the existing housing stock is the much bigger issue. So in 2020-21, £20 million of funding was allocated by Welsh Government towards what they called the Optimised Retrofit programme. So this was open to local housing authorities and housing associations in the first year. And the view is to create a legacy of the tools and also the foundational economy, which is the skills and the knowledge and the supply chain of all the various measures that are going to need to be installed at a much greater scale than has been done so previously. Obviously, as was mentioned there by Nest, there's a lot of work been going on over the last 20 or 30 years, but the declaration of a climate emergency is really focused on the fact that it's not enough, it's not sufficient. What's been happening to date, we need to increase the pace and increase the scale of what we're doing with our existing housing stock. So that's the overall intention of the first year to start down that path. One of the requirements is that intelligent energy systems are installed. That's a Welsh Government requirement. It's kind of smart meters plus. So they work with the smart meters to give another layer of detail, firstly on energy usage, but also on the internal conditions of the homes. So that actually ties back again to Nest's sort of health agenda and the fact that our internal environment is so important for health. So they will be monitoring things like humidity in the home, CO2 levels, as well as just things like temperature. So the Welsh Government are also keen to encourage consortiums. What they don't want is to see lots of little kind of hubs is a word that's possibly overused. There seems to be hundreds of hubs everywhere looking at things. They really want to approach this on an open basis. So collaboration is encouraged and consortiums. 21, 21, 22 is at the bottom of the slide there. I'll come back to that later. Further funding is in the pipeline. So that's the exciting news, which I'll address later on. So the part of it that I'm involved in is an unprecedented consortium bid, which has got £13 million in grant and £2.5 million of Welsh Government loans available to social housing providers. So there are some others that were funded as sort of standalone bids, mainly by local authorities. There's 3 or 4 of those that are kind of doing their own thing, but they're on a much smaller scale. So it may well be that we all kind of merge in years to come. So the overall project goal is to start with Pathfinder social homes to build the approach and the tools so that all the homes in Wales can be decarbonised effectively later on. So starting with social housing, but that's not where it ends. That's only for the first year. The focus is very much on a whole home approach, addressing each home holistically and understanding what's unique about that home. And avoiding unintended consequences. In the past, we've had very much a measures-led approach where there may be some funding made available for particular measures, such as loft insulation or new boilers, double glazing, etc. What some more than others, loft insulation is a fairly no-risk measure, but when we start getting into things like external wall insulation, cavity wall insulation, that kind of thing, they change the moisture balance of the home, so there's a big risk of unintended consequences with kind of internal moisture condensation, that kind of thing. So yeah, the whole home approach is very important. So ultimately what we're looking to do is set out a pathway to zero for each home. So that's really measuring the baseline, where's it starting at, and then planning out over a number of years. It's not a case of throwing a huge amount of money at each home now. It's a case of planning it so that it can be done over a number of years. So largely so that the baby isn't thrown out with the bathwater. For example, there's no point in throwing out say double glazing that has say 5 years to 10 years of efficient working life left in order to install windows which might be slightly better performing, but then you're wasting all that embodied carbon and you're not getting the most out of what you've got, and you're not getting the most out of the budget either. It's such a big issue. There's so much money that's going to have to be spent, and there's so many measures that are going to have to be undertaken that we need to plan it all up front to make sure that that money is spent most effectively and that everything is done so that the most urgent issues are addressed first, and we're solving the most serious problems rather than, as I say, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Okay. So there's the 26 housing association partners who are on board in the first year. They are most of the, however you measure it, whether you say number of housing associations, number of homes that each one has, or you know, say however you measure it, that is most of them. That is most of the social housing providers in across Wales. We did have one local authority on board as well, although because of the timing and the different procurement rules that local authorities are under, they have kind of taken a back seat at the moment. There are several more that are in discussion, so we will be having some more local authorities coming back into the consortium as we go into the second year. In terms of the geographical spread, you can see a map there. That's where the Pathfinder homes are. So the housing association partners have nominated 1,724, to be exact, Pathfinder homes of a variety of different housing archetypes. There's everything from flats through to detached houses, bungalows and terrace houses, everything in between, and of all different ages as well, going from the traditional solid walled homes right up to some fairly modern, I think about 1990s is the most modern, most new built homes that we have. So you can see on the map there that it's a fairly, the geographical spread at the moment probably roughly pretty closely collates with the, or aligns with the population spread across Wales, obviously clustered in the sort of the cities and along the north coast there. There's possibly a little bit of a lack of sort of rural properties in mid Wales and West Wales, but that again is in hand. That will be addressed going forward. So yeah, quite a broad set of homes, however you look at it. So each home will have a retrofit journey. It starts off with a whole home survey, and then we'll go through the intelligent energy system installation. So they're really the two sources of data. One is a traditional survey, and the other is a clever gadget which sits next to the fuse board and measures, as I said before, the environmental conditions and also the energy usage in a greater level of detail. Using those two data streams, that they feed into the Pathways to Zero plan, and then a building passport is produced for each home, which includes the projection of when net zero can be achieved for that home. So that's ultimately very important. Typically what that may involve is that all the measures that can be undertaken to a home may well be done over, so they may all be done in one go in a year's time, for example. They may also more commonly be spread out over 10, 15 years as the existing fabric and the existing systems or heating systems, etc., reach the end of their life. So that's all going to be mapped out for each home. Now, it may well be, for example, that a home, everything that can be done to make that home more efficient, more energy efficient, may well be done by, say, 2032, but the projected year of net zero may well be 2035, for example. The reason for that is that it takes into account the decarbonisation of the national grid. So as more large-scale renewables come on board and the grid becomes decarbonised, that actually helps with the problem. So just because all the measures have been done doesn't mean that a house automatically reaches net zero at that point, but we can predict the point at which it will do in future. So that's very important for individual housing associations to predict across their whole housing stock when they will become net zero as an organisation, and also for Welsh Government to be able to predict when the housing stock of Wales will become net zero. So yeah, the last point on the slide there, retrofit measures are applied in a number of steps which are aligned with long-term maintenance and refurbishment plans. So at the moment, housing associations have long-term plans. The part of their business plans will be for over 25 years to undertake certain maintenance and refurbishment at particular times. Now, this is potentially an interesting tie-in for cooperatives and community housing, because my understanding is that they're very much kind of long-term plans as well. It's not all about doing everything on day one. Budgets often don't allow it, and so a longer term plan is appropriate. So there's a quick infographic of the three main technological things that we're rolling out. So the whole home survey is a comprehensive survey of each home. That's a tablet-based app which allows quite an efficient process for surveyors to go round and collect all that information. We've trained over 150 maintenance officers from housing associations in undertaking that survey, so they're starting to survey their own stock at the moment. That's something I'll come back to. Smart meters, the UK rollout of smart metering is unfortunately way behind target. It was originally supposed to be completed by 2016, and here we are 5 years later, and we're nowhere near. So I'd urge everybody to have a smart meter installed. It's very important for, as it says there, allowing the national grid to more accurately provide power when needed, learning how the actual energy usage within each home happens in practice. I can say that a lot of the reservations people have around smart meters are unfounded. There's quite a lot of myths around them. It's not Big Brother, it's about net zero. So yeah, I would urge everyone to ask their energy provider for the smart meter for which they're entitled. And then the third element there is the intelligent energy system, which is something that is free issued by CERO to the housing associations at the moment. It's a Welsh Government requirement that works alongside the smart meter to basically digitise the home, and it captures the indoor environmental conditions, which are so important to health and well-being of the occupants, really enables a lot of information to be captured about the energy usage within the home. So moving on. So that's a representation of the whole home survey. So things such as the orientation, even if you have homes that are essentially based along the same floor plans, etc., the fact that they face different directions, different orientations does come into the energy efficiency. So it's really about capturing, efficiently capturing the unique characteristics of every home. And then the pathways to zero works something like a game, as you see here, a game of top trumps. So the measures are selected, and depending on the data that's collected from the whole home survey and the intelligent energy system, various measures are ruled in and ruled out, and vitally really the interplay between various measures is captured as well, and that's flagged up so that certain measures will rule each other out, and certain measures can be installed together, but there's other things that need to be taken into account. Sometimes where they actually have junctions between, for example, wall insulation and windows, there's particular details that have to be followed. So this is all in line with PAS 2030 and PAS 2035, which are effectively the British standard, which has been developed for energy efficient refurbishment and retrofit. So that's a quick overview of where things are now. Optimised Retrofit 2, I was hoping Julie James might give us a little bit of a scoop on an announcement of the next round. We're currently waiting for that announcement. The election came into it, and obviously the reorganisation of the ministries, that kind of thing, is relevant to the timescales here. But we are hearing that ORP1, as we call it, which is the Optimised Retrofit Year 1, is likely to be enlarged significantly for ORP2. I'm talking here about public sector financial years. The consortium that we have on board, the housing associations, are supportive, and they want to continue and grow the collaboration. They're welcoming more social landlords and local authorities on board, so it's a growing collaboration. And the two most interesting points, I think, for this meeting are the bottom two there. Welsh Government are likely, we're hearing, to expand the funding opportunities into the privately owned sector through partnerships with housing associations. So firstly, that'll be the private rented sector, but possibly also the cooperative sector, the community-led sector. So that's a conversation they're very interested in. And the way that is conceived as working at the moment is that it would require partnerships with local housing associations. So the map that I showed you earlier, there's quite a geographical spread there, but we now have housing associations there who have in-house surveyors, maintenance officers who are trained in the use of the whole home survey. Some of them have in-house installers who can install the intelligent energy systems as well. So the thinking really is that the most efficient way to make this available to the private rented sector and to housing co-ops is through partnerships with housing associations. So we'd be very much looking to set up links there and give share contacts, etc., to enable people to have those discussions. Ultimately, it'll be about accessing grant funding for measures. So things like insulation, more efficient heating systems, for electrification or heating and that kind of thing. So at the moment, we're still waiting on the announcement of the funding and also the timescales around it in terms of when we're going to have to submit the bid as a collaboration. So we're already working on the bid. So we're preparing for that already, but we don't have the deadline, and we don't know exactly how the funding is going to be released, whether it will be all in one go or whether it will be in tranches over a set timescale. So while we wait for the detail, expressions of interest are welcome from community-led housing groups, whether that's one building, one house or upwards. I know there's some community-led housing is kind of more than one home, whether it's adjacent terraced houses or separate buildings, separate homes on a shared land, for example. Yeah, we're interested in hearing from anybody who's interested in accessing grant funding. And the means to do that is there on the screen now. Probably not by phone because there's no one in the office at the moment for two reasons. Firstly, the ongoing COVID restrictions, and secondly, because our office refit is still going on. But the email address there is the best place to come through that. That'll come through to myself and the team. And yeah, we can register interest. We can answer any further questions that may occur to you after today. Yeah, we can kind of start to gauge the interest and the size of the funding that may potentially be required to enable the community-led housing to access the considerable amount of grant funding which is being made available. So that's all from me for the moment. Happy to answer any questions, as I say, either as part of this meeting today or via email in future. That's fine. So I'll leave the slide up until Alan tells me to take it down, just in case anyone's writing down the email address.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alan, and thank you so much for coming along today. And I really hope we are able to develop relationships between housing co-ops and housing associations and the Optimised Retrofit programme to see if we can deliver some changes to those hard to heat homes that we know are out there in the housing co-op world. And also, I know you're interested in off-the-grid properties, which is something probably a bit unique to housing co-ops in relation to housing associations.
Yes, actually, on that point, so are Welsh Government. They're particularly interested in off-gas grid properties. It's slightly in contrast to the situation in England. So there's lots of conversations going on with the UK government. Yeah, we have more off-gas grid social housing in Wales, which isn't so common in England. And yes, also sort of cooperatively owned housing potentially is similar. There's lots of sort of rural fuel poverty. There are off-gas grid properties in England, but it doesn't tend to be social housing and cooperative housing to the same extent. So yeah, Welsh Government very interested in off-gas grid properties.
Right, thank you. And yeah, we will send your email and also the Nest details out to people after the call. And I think it is fair to say that you're up for a more detailed discussion with housing co-ops if that funding does become available. And to go through the programme in more detail of what that would actually mean in practice. Brilliant. So we're coming to the end of our session, and there are some questions in the chat, but does anybody want to come online and open their mics and ask a direct question? Judith, is that a hand?
Sorry, no, I was just pushing something out of the way.
There we are. Thank you. So was there a question for Dylan and Peter from earlier? Sorry, Judith, do you want to?
I did post a question on the chat about my particular group, community group. I'm not really sure what to, I'm so new to this, I'm not really sure what to call us, because nobody's really been involved in anything like this prior to the new committee that we're setting up now. It's all largely been go it alone and move forward with the management committee from Pobl, so that we pay. So now we're trying to look at totally redoing the 29 properties we have, with looking at solar installation, new windows, new doors. These all haven't been done for many, many years. So I'm just sort of trying to find my way, I think.
That's it. Have you had a chat with one of my colleagues from the centre? Casey's nodding.
Casey, yeah.
Yeah, you're doing a great job, Judith. We've got a lot to learn, I think, together. You're one of the only remaining schemes of your type in the UK. So yes, it's not a straightforward process, but we'll get there in the end. It's nice to see you here today.
Thanks.
I think there's a question from Duncan there.
Okay, hi, I'm Duncan Burwood. I'm a member of Zero Carbon Llywodraeth, which was set up about 18 months ago to do what we can to decarbonise the area around Llywodraeth. And we're interested in renewable energy and energy efficiency. Now, being as the Welsh Government has got such a systematic approach to the energy efficiency improvement, compared with the bloody Tories over the border, excuse my Welsh. Just wondered what a voluntary organisation, voluntary environmental organisation like ours can do to help the Optimised Retrofit scheme be advanced, you know, whether we can take part in advertising it or just talking to people, or what? I've really no idea what we could do to help.
That's an interesting question, actually, because engaging with residents is one of the key challenges, really. I'm sure this is sort of familiar to Nest as well. It's very much about, and I showed you there the 3 different starting points, which is around the whole home survey, the smart metering, which is the bit that we don't do, we can't do, unfortunately, and the intelligent energy system. And the difficulty with those particularly is that the benefit perhaps isn't tangible up front. If you say to someone where you're going to get, you know, insulation, a new heating system, new windows, etc., then they kind of understand that and get on board. So yeah, really, it's more difficult with social housing tenants when we're sort of, I mean, it's not what we at Cero do, but what the housing associations are doing, when that's trying to engage with their residents and get them involved and get their consent. So yeah, in terms of how you can help, I'm not sure at this stage, but yeah, it's very much a learning process, really. So part of the second year is going to be widening that and getting involved with different tenure types. So yeah, there'll be more opportunity to get involved later on. So I think we'll get some more clarity about that as we go forward. But thanks very much for your interest in helping. That's very welcome.
Thank you. There's a question from Maggie around the continued use of gas, and I'm as a heating source, and I'm presuming that that is around switching to electric as a heating source. I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Essentially, at the moment, yes, decarbonisation means electrification in practice. There's lots of talk about hydrogen, but that's as yet unproven in terms of decarbonisation, because hydrogen requires energy to separate it. You know, hydrogen is very abundant everywhere, but it's also very clingy to other elements. So in order to separate hydrogen out, it has to be, you know, that's very energy intensive. So at the moment, essentially, yes, decarbonisation means moving away from gas very much. That's not going to happen overnight. When I talk about the Welsh Government's interest in off-gas grid properties, they're really looking at the problem of oil and LPG fired heating systems, and the fact that if they are electrified, there's the potential for fuel poverty to become an issue, because electricity is more expensive than gas per unit. So that's where heat pumps come in to their own, because a heat pump is very efficient in terms of, for every unit of energy you put in, you get between 3 and 4 out. So that actually cost-wise puts it on the same level as gas. It makes it competitive with gas. Because at the moment, gas costs about a quarter of the price of electricity. So yeah, that's where heat pumps are a really important part of the future direction. But it's not a straight swap. The building fabric comes into it as well, because essentially heat pumps operate at a lower temperature than gas boilers. So the fabric, the sort of has to be suitable. So it can mean extra insulation needs to be put in, and also they can't provide instant hot water. So they can provide hot water to a cylinder, but obviously over the last kind of couple of decades, everybody's moved away from cylinders. Everybody's got rid of their airing cupboards and moved over to gas combis. And now it's kind of like we're going to have to go back the other way. Interestingly, though, there's a lot that can be done with hot water storage in terms of decarbonisation. The grid, the amount of carbon that goes into producing electricity is not stable. It's not consistent. It varies throughout the day, and depending on what the weather's doing, really, if the sun's shining, if the wind's blowing. So what is very useful in terms of decarbonisation is the ability to time shift energy, so that if, for example, the wind is blowing hard out at sea in the middle of the night and creating lots of energy, then we need to be able to store that and make it usable during tea time when everybody's got their kettle on and is watching the telly. So yes, that batteries come into it. Photovoltaic solar panels have historically been installed without batteries, but that's becoming rarer now. Batteries do tend to be kind of at least suggested, if not kind of installed readily as part of a photovoltaic system. So really, between batteries and hot water tanks, they're the two methods of storing renewable energy. So that's, again, a large part of the pathways to zero. It's not just electrification, it's also looking at how we store energy so that we can effectively time shift and match up the supply of renewable energy with the demand for it, because it's not always that we very rarely actually line up.
Great, thank you, Alan. And I think it's probably time to close and say goodbye now. But Peter, I just wanted to ask you if you had any final words you wanted to pass on before we did close.
Yeah, well, thanks ever so much for the invitation to attend. It's lovely to meet everybody and hear about the projects and the offers there for people to contact Nest, okay, on 0808 808 2244. That's the advice team at Nest. They're open Monday to Friday, 9 till 6. And as Dylan said, we've now recently talked with Welsh Government about how cooperatives can be eligible for this help, and that's on a case-by-case basis. So the starting point is to speak to the advice team. So if you're interested, please do go that way, and any queries, please get in touch with Alan. I'm sure he'll feed them to me and Dylan with any queries.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
I will. Thank you so much for coming. And Badger, is there anywhere that people can see your loan stock offer, or have you got a website or anything?
Hi, yeah. So the best thing at the moment would be if anyone's interested to email us at Tir Cyffredin at riseup.net, and I've put that into the chat. Yeah.
Brilliant. And you're happy for us to share that email with the meeting?
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Brilliant, will do. Okay, great.
I just say I've been sort of lurking on these meetings for the last few months and found them really stimulating, and I'll continue to do that. So any updates I get from Welsh Gov, I'll be hearing over the next few months. So as soon as I hear, I'll pass that news on.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks, Alan. Okay, so yeah, thanks everybody for staying. I know we've run a bit over time, but I think that was well worth it to hear everybody's voices and all the information that we're absorbing right now. So yeah, we'll be back in a month's time with this network. I think we have some training coming up as well, a couple of training sessions, and which you're very welcome to come along to, and we'll share the details of those via email. After this network, I will send out an email and we'll share the details, and then subsequently as well. And we're on Facebook, Communities Creating Homes, and on Twitter at CCLH Cymru, I think it is. So yeah, follow us and keep in touch. I don't know if any of my colleagues have anything they want to add before I close that I've missed. No.
Just thank you all for attending. It's great to see so many people, because quite often in the networks we get a lot of organisations, so it's lovely to see so many groups involved in the one today. Maybe we'll have to get a minister to everyone, get more people out. I'm sure that's what prompted a lot of people today. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks everybody, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone, bye.
Bye.